My name is Jennifer Galvin. I work for a company called Ostrato. We're local to Sterling, Virginia. I myself am local to Washington, D.C., which is why I've been coming to Hassan's meetups for some time now. And I've been involved with Openstack for at least a year with Ostrato and also previously at VMware. And I guess we're going to talk about, I want to ask a question of you guys, because what we didn't do in this meetup that I've done for a couple of meetups is we didn't talk about generally about OpenStack and the components of OpenStack. So, how many people here would like a small overview of OpenStack and want, to get some explanation about OpenStack or new to OpenStack? Is there anyone here who would value an overview of OpenStack and the current functionality?
I'm the only new guy who's on, right?
Yeah,
I'm a rookie.
Oh, okay, all right. So we'll do that briefly, and then we'll talk about how OpenStack, how Ostrato will help OpenStack first. Okay. So, what is OpenStack? So OpenStack began as an open source cloud software framework in 2010. And I'll just give you guys some of my experience in the past. So back in 2007, I started one of my first cloud projects at DISA. It was called Race for Rapid Access Computing. And it was one of the first private clouds that were built to address on-demand computing and secure computing for DISA. So that was one of many. I've since gone on to build several clouds. At Verizon, we built Compute as a Service, which is the predecessor of Terramark and the Terramark acquisition. I went on and I built the cloud infrastructure that runs Disney FastPass. So if you guys have kids and you go to Disney, this is one of my favorite projects because we did not know what this was going to be. And Disney FastPass is a piece, it's a band that you get prior to your vacation that your kids wear and you wear, and if you stay in a hotel and if you go to any of the parks, all of your entry and exit and payments are all done through the little bracelet. It was a top secret project. We didn't know what it was. All we knew was it was going to be some wearable technology, and I thought it was going to be like a badge, some, in IT. Not cool at all. And I'm so glad they made the bracelet. So the kids really like it. But throughout all those projects were built with proprietary vendor technology. And this was really a struggle to meet the customer's needs by stitching together, what we had in the market with what they were really demanding for on-premise computing. And it's really no surprise that when you look at some of these projects, we really needed a very general open source platform to abstract the underlying hardware so that we could give our customers some choice. So now when you look at the technology that underlies several of these clouds that I speak of, that technology has changed many times over. And most of the requirements in those projects changed religiously every 6 months. So what OpenStack is giving us is a way to abstract the underlying infrastructure components so that you can have more choice and more flexibility in how you construct your computing, and also to abstract how your users access that computing so that they don't see those changes in the underlying technology. And I'll just go through some of the OpenStack components for the most recent release, which is Juno. So we talked a little bit about the storage components, which you see here in the previous talk with Cloud Founders with object storage and image storage, which are named Swift and Glance. Most of what you guys interact with today in OpenStack has to do with compute and networking. Compute, codenamed Nova, and networking, codenamed Neutron. So when you look at support for OpenStack, what you're really looking at is support not only for OpenStack, but the version of OpenStack and also which components are supported. So the functionality, if you have a vendor you're looking at that is compatible with OpenStack, the questions you need to ask are which pieces of OpenStack are you supporting and working with. So you'll see at the top we have the dashboard and also the API, and Ceilometer, which is the telemetry, the thing that's outputting the metrics about what is being used in the infrastructure, and also identity services, similar to the ones that you see in public cloud, as well as some new services that you see coming up in newer versions of OpenStack. So in addition to compute, networking, and storage, you'll see services coming up for database provisioning, for elastic map reuse, and for orchestration. Any questions? Okay, great. So, really briefly, the big idea behind OpenStack is this allows you to control your cloud and abstract all of these pieces. And this is really important when you look at user adoption and building infrastructure for users to come and consume, because right now, and potentially my work is a part of this, right now, and as far back in 2007 till now, people have been building infrastructure to serve as public clouds, and all of them are different. And all of them provide dissimilar capabilities, and they're all established to some degree. So when you have users that are going to use to look at some of this capacity for their applications, each application has different requirements. The users and the architects are making choices about what to use. And that's why managing lots of diverse applications that are distributed among some of those cloud providers is very difficult today, because there's already been some adoption of some of these very dissimilar services. OpenStack is a great solution to this problem, but what we also want to do is attract people who are using these services. And what we want to do is we want to manage and view these services in a single pane of glass and really get a good perspective on how our billing is being aggregated and how our users are using these services, and we want to provide no learning curve for them to use these services. And they're not common. So here's a chart also to give you an idea of how they are different. So the leader, the most established public cloud provider today is Amazon. Amazon has the most thought leadership in some of these new services that are being offered, but you'll see here, if you wish to use capacity in all of these providers, you'll see that you have capabilities in some that are not present in others. And each one has a separate API and a separate learning curve. So this would be very difficult very quickly. So what we want to talk about now is a new concept called a cloud broker, which is a cloud management platform that works to bring all of your capacity under a single pane of glass and allow you to expose that capacity to your users in a very governed format so that they can only request things that they should have access to and provision them in areas for the compliance that they need. We also wish, as a broker, to provide new capabilities in governance and policy. So we'll show you guys some of the capabilities we're adding on top of each of these cloud providers that neither of them contains functionality for. And finally, we want to simplify how the role-based access control and reporting is being done. So a lot of these new cloud infrastructures, they are public. They don't necessarily work with some of the established role-based access controls that many companies have. What we want to do is onboard customers very quickly, discover and manage all those resources under a single pane of glass, and connect directly to the systems that you guys have now. So make it very simple for you guys to really manage the cloud chaos. Okay, this is a cloud broker. So what should you expect out of a cloud broker? Some of the key capabilities are that you should be able to aggregate those services. You should have automation around those services, so you should have a pre-built way when you buy a broker to provision into those clouds and decommission. It should work directly with your role-based access control and expose and assign ownership to the correct users in your environment. And it should aggregate them under a single pane of glass and provide extensible workflow. So we'll talk about how, if you guys are using other types of automation, if you guys are using Chef or SaltStack or Puppet in your environment, even Puppet, Chef, and SaltStack also have customizations that you must do for each instance, for each public cloud provider. What we'd like to do is generalize that, and so under the Ostrato workflow, such that each automation that you do is added as part of the automation of provisioning and decommissioning. So when you provision something, Ostrato cloudSM knows how to do that. It invokes the automation that you have created, and now that automation is applicable to any kind of cloud provider. And that's the way that we're going to abstract it. So these are the capabilities that you should expect out of a broker. Okay. So what does this allow you to do? Just like OpenStack, we are software to control all of your cloud resources from a single pane of glass. So just like OpenStack, we have a single pane of glass and also an API, except this time you would use that unified dashboard, that unified API to control all of the resources. Questions? So let's show you guys a little bit about what the user experience is for Ostrato. So right now I'm going to show you guys just a brief overview of what that means to aggregate and expose this for your users. So we've created a user that's pretty typical of maybe one of your environments. And this would be a developer in your environment that needs to request and manage instances for their projects. So right away when they log in, they have a customizable dashboard that they can use to get a bird's eye view of all of their resources under management. So in my demo environment, I actually have about 6 providers that are connected, but this user and their group only has access to the resources that they've provisioned. So right now you'll see they have 5 instances that are provisioned. 1 is in Azure, 1 is in OpenStack, and 3 are in Amazon. And to the user, this is not very important. It's just for reporting, but it gives them a sense of what they've got in total. I'm also using this to try to govern my environment. So we have some neat functionality for you to cut your costs and to really bring the bill down on some of those public cloud providers. The first is of course some of these widgets you see here from the user perspective. They're really looking for overtaxed resources. So any virtual machines that show up here and over 70%, that tells me that I need to go resize those virtual machines. They are working too hard. This also gives me an idea of my daily average cost because as you'll see from Ostrato and the global provider, we want to give extra functionality and cap users via budget. Go ahead.
So where are you getting your metrics from? Are you deploying agents or? We
are not deploying agents. So right now we are collecting metrics from the cloud providers that expose them. So we collect metrics from VMware, from OpenStack, and from is it Amazon?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. The question is, where do we get these metrics from?
So with OpenStack, are you guys leveraging Kilometer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How do you find, how do you define the cost for an instance on OpenStack?
Thank you. That's a very good question. So as a broker too, we work with 2 types of billing. The first is, let's go ahead and show you what the user has just so you can get a sense of what I have in here. We work with 2 types of billing. The first is a reservation-based billing, which is common to the broker. So the broker has the capability to assign any price you choose to any service in the marketplace. And this is useful for providers that don't have a costing structure. VMware is one of them, and OpenStack is another one. So while you're getting metrics out of Kilometer for potentially usage-based billing, that is also DIY, and there's really no mechanism to tie the usage-based to any costing mechanism. This is what Ostrato is doing. So what we did is we took a cloud survey that's available on our website for 2014, the top concerns of every customer, and there's a great chart on there I have with me that shows you what the top cloud providers in use were, but we also asked them what was the cloud provider you were going to look at in 2015, the top provider, and the majority of the respondents responded with OpenStack. So OpenStack is on everyone's minds, yes, for 2015. And then we asked them a couple other questions, which were very interesting. We asked them a couple things like, who is your CEO or CIO involved in your OpenStack project? And the majority of them said yes. So we then asked also, how important are certain things to your CEO or CIO? And the number one thing that was important was chargeback and showback to the business. So this is a big problem with OpenStack, where we have the capability to provision and decommission resources in our private cloud, but we don't have a way to meet the C-level requirement of chargeback and showback. So putting something like Ostrato, cloudSM together with OpenStack would immediately meet that requirement.
AWS, is it compatible with GovCloud?
Yes.
AWS
Oh,
GovCloud?
yes. Yes.
Yeah, so, what?
This is Dale, our CTO.
Yeah, so what you find with the providers like Amazon and GovCloud, and you find with Microsoft Azure and Microsoft Azure Government, is that they're generally just two different pathways into the same kinds of recalls or calls from an API standpoint. Okay, I mean you have two different landing points basically. So we support those. Yes, it's usually when you're going to provision out, it's a checkbox saying whether you're GovCloud or whether you're Microsoft Azure Government.
Right. And then also from the user perspective, so going back to our demo environment, so behind the scenes, this is connected to 6 different cloud providers. The user doesn't really know this, and also I'm not connecting to the cloud providers via the DevOps user. I'm connecting via 1 or 2 central accounts that I have with these various providers, and I'm only connecting with one account on the OpenStack API. So what cloudSM is doing is it's assigning role-based access control to each and every one of these. So even though there's a pool of OpenStack VMs that are provisioned, I as the DevOps user, that's loud. I as the DevOps user, I only see one. And you can go ahead and add this right into your environment. We also discover previously provisioned instances. So you'll see here in the dashboard this little rabbit in a hat. This means that we discovered this in the environment already. So we didn't have to provision anything to register it. We can immediately true up the environment by just discovering what you have out there. We also want to apply some global policy. So governance was key on our customers' minds. Many of the cloud, I will tell you actually from experience, all 3 of the cloud projects I worked on that were for private cloud, when we exposed the capacity without any accountability for chargeback or showback, the capacity was eaten in a matter of weeks. And in one case, it was eaten in 3 days. And this is because people love free stuff. So they would provision the biggest VMs, they provisioned the most of them. We estimated storage and we ran out in 3 days. And so what we want to do is we want to add capability on top of all these providers that is unique to Ostrato and not necessarily any of the other cloud providers we broker. So you'll see a couple of icons here. The first is this little clock. That means that this particular provisioned instance has an expiration date. So also a structure not common in OpenStack. When you provision something, there's no real expiration date, there's no real timeline for these things to exist. The same with all these public providers who can simply provision and they're just out there. So we want to have some governance to have these instances for temporary projects be reclaimed. And Ostrato is adding that governance so that when you provision these, they will get an expiration date. In fact, these are added directly in the marketplace when the user comes to provision in the marketplace here, which I'll show you in a minute. They are not given an option to have an indeterminate lifetime. They must pick an expiration date. And this will help you clean up your environment. The second thing we're doing is we're adding what we call a parking calendar. And the purpose of this is to shut down resources that are not being used during non-working hours. So if you have some development resources, what we want to do is apply these parking calendars so that they're shut down outside of normal business hours and they save the bill. And so if you are using public cloud providers today, you are probably very interested in setting up OpenStack to reduce that bill because private infrastructure is 1/6 the cost of Amazon AWS. However, in the interim, you can deploy cloudSM and you can park those instances. And the parking is also applicable to any cloud provider. So, while this potentially is not saving the bill with OpenStack, if you've already purchased those resources, what it allows you to do is to get greater density for projects that are not as critical, or frees up other resources for other projects that are not in use. So if you have an immediate project, it makes you more agile. If you have an immediate project and you're out of space, it might take some time to get new infrastructure, or you can just park.
Time sharing, you can't escape it.
Right, exactly. And you'll see here all of these provisioned with an automation policy through the catalog. So you'll see here these are actually stopped, and the reason they're stopped is they're parked. It is technically outside of business hours for Ostrato. So these are now stopped and they will wake up and be powered on before 9 a.m. tomorrow. And you'll see that each of these was provisioned with an automation profile. So this one here is provisioned with the same automation profile in Azure as it is in Amazon. They're both attached and registered with SaltStack for base OS config. So the same automation that you are doing, you can apply immediately to your OpenStack VMs. And that should make your users very happy. We also have some capability to help you guys adopt existing users of public cloud. So we can also create new services in the marketplace that are ready for immediate use. So as a user, when I go, let's say I'm a user and I use these public clouds today, and you guys are setting up OpenStack in your environment, and you want people to come use your stuff. Well, the first thing they need is a login. We're taking care of that with the role-based access. Connected, they're in, and they get access to the appropriate catalog items. The second thing they need to do is to understand how to provision the new OpenStack things. And you'll see here we have many items that have many providers, but each of them are very, very simple. So you'll see here as we look at the user interface, it's very easy to use. It's very easy to request what we need. And it also helps drive down some of that noise because we're only exposing things they would like to provision, and we're excluding things from the public catalog. So there are 18,000 AMIs available today in Amazon. There are 9,000 in Azure. There are probably thousands in other cloud providers. It's very noisy with some of the publicly available services. What we're doing is we're cutting this down for the user so they can understand what they're doing. Each of these is provisioned exactly the same. So if they were only an Amazon user, they simply have to request something from the catalog. This provisions directly in Azure, for example, and they're on their way without having to know anything about Azure or how it works. The same with OpenStack. So they can click on OpenStack. They can fill in a simple set of options, and they can provision virtual machines. And with no learning curve whatsoever to do that. Questions?
So when you're saying provisioning a machine in Azure, you're actually building that out in Azure?
Yes.
And then you have the OpenStack, so you can cross-compare and
Yes.
they can decide whether we want it locally or and then. Now,
Yes.
once you have the billing information, can that be exported out of this?
Yes. So I'll show you, I'll become the manager in just a little bit, and I'll show you some of those reports that we generate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So this looks like the cloud infrastructure in terms of storage and networking has to be set up. This would be for provisioning systems into already existing projects, already existing networks. Is that correct?
Yes. So for your private infrastructure, we do expect some administration to be done because we are connecting directly to that provider. So when we connect and we discover those resources, some of them do have to be set up, but then we're simply consuming them.
What's not shown here, because she doesn't have permissions, is that there's a settings button on top where the admin configures everything, and I guess she's going to probably show you that, so I'm not stealing it. But
Oh, yes.
yeah, what you're seeing here is a user portal or a marketplace that's unique to this user, and so we can create multiple ones of these, right? Depending on what your permissions are, what group you're in, what project you're in, you see what you're allowed to see, and you're free to then spin up any of these on your own in a self-service way.
And we're also...
So you have to create roles in the cloud provider that are capable of performing these actions.
Yes, and so we do integrate also with LDAP as well. So if you have organizational units in your company, all you have to do is map those organizational units to the created group. And so that's a very simple process. You guys know, we have about 5 roles in our demos. They range from users to managers to finance people to infrastructure admins. From there, most of the OUs will match one of those roles. It's a very simple process.
How accurate is it to their actual billing?
Oh, that's a good question. So we are 100% accurate when we report on our reservation-based billing, obviously. For some other providers that do expose billing data, we do ingest the billing data from the provider. So for example, Amazon will dump billing data into buckets for retrieval. They'll do that today for the user. I don't know if has anyone ever seen that, by the way? Has anyone ever seen the billing data that comes out of any provider? Yeah, like what level of expertise do you think you need to go through that billing data? Is it like easy?
It wasn't super hard, but it was a lot of information.
Yeah, it's like a really big file.
It's tedious.
Tedious, yeah. So so this is something that we talked about. I think I wrote a blog post on this, but Amazon's billing is very mature, it's very complex, and it's very hard to understand, and it's very hard to separate out per organization. And that's probably intentional. I mean, if you understood your bill, probably figure out a way to reduce it.
So do you separate billing from instantiation of images, of instances? Because not every role should have the capability to see the billing.
Correct, yes. So each and every type of thing that you do in the portal is permissioned. So you'll see I don't actually have any buttons or any selections to view the billing. That's because I'm a user. So I'm gonna switch roles in a little bit to talk about that manager. But to get back to that question, let me just sum that up. The stuff that they're dumping, right, they're giving it to you, but it's not simple. And the same with Salameter data, right? It's great that it's there, we all want it, but the focus of OpenStack is to provide an abstraction layer for the users to provide choice under OpenStack. It's not really to make your life easy when it comes to reporting to your C-level executives. So I don't really foresee that really getting easier. I think that that's an opportunity for us to try to connect and simplify that data. And we're already bringing it in for Amazon. We're already truing up the billing that's coming in from Amazon with the Amazon instances.
So each of the items up here, does that tie back to a specific? Is that tying back to a specific image within OpenStack, or are you guys leveraging anything like Heat or Murano to do orchestration on the back end?
Oh, that's a very good question. So right now we're tapping into the compute services of OpenStack. So we're not tapping into Heat right now to run some of the more complex workflows, but we do have what we call, we have 3 different structures that you're seeing here in the marketplace. The first is a service, which is a general service, and it connects directly to the provider that provides it. So each one of these that provisions a single virtual machine is a service. We also have what we call a composite. And a composite is a structure to provision multiple services. So we generalize, so this is a great adoption mechanism because you'll see a lot of people adopting proprietary structures to provision very large applications. One of the big ones is Amazon. They'll use CloudFormation templates. And CloudFormation templates are JSON documents. They're great for specifying the structure, how to provision a very large application in Amazon, but unfortunately, they're only compatible with Amazon things. So if you have these very large applications, Amazon wants to incentivize you to continue to provision them in Amazon. We want to incentivize you to provision them anywhere, potentially bring them in-house in OpenStack. And so what we can do is we can create new marketplace items from the JSON CloudFormation templates, and we translate them into a composite. And that composite can contain anything. So you could take those items and you could eventually provision them on OpenStack. So if you have users that say, we really like Amazon and these are the tools we use, now you combine OpenStack with cloudSM and you say, that's great, why don't we translate all your stuff into composites, and then let's put them in the marketplace as composites, and let's give them, let's go ahead and cost them accurately. So you'll see here, this is a composite app. It provisions 2 servers, one in Azure and one in VMware. And it has a cost associated with it. Let's cost it appropriately so that when they come here and they look for certain things in a certain price range, you know, they are incentivized to use the cheaper infrastructure. That list goes down.
So with, so the level of orchestration is outside of an OpenStack, so you can't leverage advanced functionality and heat, such as like auto scaling or anything like that. Is that correct?
Not at this time, no. But we have a third item in the catalog called generic. And so it's possible for you to add a generic, and that generic can eventually call a heap workload.
You can't ask questions, your previous presenter.
I can ask questions. She said I could ask difficult questions.
Yes.
Am I right in assuming that these prices, for example, are based on the amount of RAM CPU you're taking? Do you also take into account, for example, storage space? Let's say that if you take snapshot out of Ubuntu, which is running on AWS, and if you store that, for example, in a bucket into S3, will that be taken into account?
Yes. So there's 2 ways to do that. The first is every service has what we call price modifier. So they have base, you'll see things like base price, and then you'll see on some of these as low as, and then we find some that potentially change for you. Let's see, we have a couple that are different. Yeah, so base price as low as, right? Actually not quite a good example. Yeah, so what this means is that without any of those options, we would have this low price. But some of these, you know, for example, if you add storage capability, if you add extra volumes, if you add other things, these are all modifiers on top. So depending what the user orders, the price will change. And we'll calculate that on checkout. So the price will change depending on that. You could give them the option to take these things. And you can also expose other non-infrastructure services. So if you'd like to expose an item here that says take a snapshot or generate a snapshot, you could tag a price on that too.
But will it actually take a snapshot, and also will it call, for example, APIs
Yes.
to take snapshots? But it will also take into account, for example, if you store it into Swift, how much room it is taking into Swift. Let's say, for example, that you charge like $1 per gigabyte. That will be taken into account at the end of the bill.
Right, so a generic has a structure, but it also is free form on the API call. So what you have to do is you have to set the price and set the modifiers, and then that will be passed to the API call of your choice on the generic, and then that can do whatever you want.
So not only are you allowing them to optimize your cloud costs, but you said you could time it so that they go to sleep.
Yes, and in fact,
That's crazy.
yeah, that's one top thing. So one of the things we do, so this is what we call our global policy on top, that we're adding on top of all of these providers. So one of these items, of course, is that expiration date. So we're providing an ability for unused things to go away. We're also providing an ability for unused things to go to sleep. So if you are charged a utilization-based charge, this will lower your bill, and in some cases up to 45 or 55% of that bill, especially with providers that are just charging when these machines are on. Another part of global policy really occurs at the manager level, so I'm just going to go ahead and open Firefox back up. Oh, that's Chrome, sorry. Make this.
You need to manage.
Oh, I'm good. I'm just gonna, yeah, I'm going to switch tabs. You already set me up. So we're going to log in as me, and I'm the manager, and I have more permissions. So you'll see I have a few more options up top. I I have the ability to run the reports for governance reporting, which did not appear for the user, and I've altered my dashboard to show me more things that I want to see as a manager. And so you'll see here we have some more of this global policy. We have the capability to control that spend in a couple ways. The first is we're also reporting on the savings of parking. So while you will park and you will save and it will be reflected in your bill, we are actually showing you that percentage of the pie that you did not have to spend. And we think that's important. And it's also divided up by role-based access. So the total bill will be reduced at Amazon, no doubt. But what you won't be able to see, unless you use cloudSM, is like how my group is doing. And this is going to divide it up also by role-based access. Another aspect is the budget. So we have caps on the budget that allow you to stop people from spending unless they give up something. So we don't care which provider this is in, but we calculate the cost of people provisioning. So you'll see here my team, we're very frugal, we've only spent $5 of our budget, but you'll see here when I look at my settings and I look at my budgets, I'll just bring up one of these for you to look at. So you'll see the budget that I've set up is that I have multiple layers of actions that I could take on a budget. In this case, I have notifications that are going up, and we have at one level, we have several levels where we're denying the new orders, we're stopping instances, and in some cases we're terminating. This is a very draconian policy. But in this case, we want to level a budget on my group and on a per project basis. So that these guys, if they want to provision, they can have whatever they want, but maybe this incentivizes them to provision the cheaper things, or give up things, or apply parking calendars to discovered instances that were not previously being parked before. And this would go a long way in saving the bill so they can conform to this budget. And this would work across all cloud providers. Maybe not as important in OpenStack, but it's global policy.
How do you decide which instances to stop or to terminate? Is that like a rule, or is it like last when it was started? Or?
It's not that clever. This policy will terminate all instances. It's pretty draconian. Right. So we definitely want to hear some feedback on how you guys think that should work. For now, we're just terminating them all. If that's not an option for you, and it's pretty drastic, I would not add that as a level to your budget.
So when you say you want to be a customer of this, you like the product, you like the demo, you want to start, what do you guys offer? Do you come on site? Do you work with the customer? Do you help set them up? And ongoing maintenance? Do you purchase the product one time?
Correct. So we purchase the product. It is an enterprise product, which means that it is not SaaS-based. It will be installed either in the cloud or on your site. We do have partners that come and are integrators to help you get set up and help you manage your cloud environment. And we are instance-based. So the instances that you are managing that show up in your total counts, that is how the license is counted. So there's various tiers of licensing at that level. And alternatively, for MSPs, we do offer a white label, so you can change the look and feel if you're an MSP that wishes to resell this capability. That is also an option for you. And we have different pricing for that.
What is your footprint look like?
Our software runs on Linux.
Repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. What does our footprint look like? I assume, like, what do we run on?
Yeah, so I did some work with Parallels Automation integration with OpenStack, and they deploy like it's 7 VM deployment with 350 gigs of space minimum. So I was just curious what you know.
No, it's your deal laughing, no into that. You can condense this down to a single VM. We do scale out by component, but most of our evaluations are single VM.
What are the requirements to install?
I have a great video online. If you go to our website and you click on the videos, or if you look us up on YouTube, there's an installation video, and it'll take you through the whole installation. It takes you 3 minutes, guys. I kid you not. And all the requirements are up there. We do have a freemium model, so if you are managing less than 50 total instances, combined total, then the product is free to use. So you guys can get started tomorrow.
So in terms of licensing, tiered licensing, is it a tiered licensing based on a set of number of instances, or you can increase by one, or what's the increment model?
Yeah, right now we're doing a true up every year. So for the customer, like for the user who's buying the product, we're just doing a true up every year. So we're really flexible. For the MSP, we've really done some custom work, so we have to think about your situation a little more. But we're very flexible in that department. Okay. And then let's show you guys some of the billing. So as a manager, this is really my job, is to put some controls on my user, and then also gain also gain some of that governance and try to understand my costs. So if we click on last quarter and we run this report, and you'll see here the export button as well for the question before. We're going to run this report, and the goal for me is to understand the cost based on my group, from a potentially larger bill, based on my group, and based on provider, and based on average cost size. So as a manager, I'm really looking for the things that are, which cloud providers I'm spending the most money in, what's the most wasteful one of these. I'm really using this to cherry pick, and reduce my bill. So you'll see here we have some detailed billing. It's our total cost. So if I get a bill on my desk, I'm getting 3 bills. Our top providers for brokering right now are Amazon, Azure, and VMware. We'll talk directly to vCenter. So right now I'm getting these 3 bills, and what I really just want to understand is the total cost. The same with OpenStack. So to justify your OpenStack presence, you guys are going to need some data. We know that OpenStack is cheaper on-prem, but can anyone say how much cheaper their OpenStack implementation is today? How much money has your implementation saved you in the past 6 months? Does anyone know? Okay, so you need cloudSM to come up with these figures to really justify expansion of your OpenStack deployments. You'll also need it to kind of cherry pick some of the big offenders. So here, when I look at this bill, I'm looking at computing average from provider and on projects as well. That's important, going back to that budget. But this will also help me cherry pick the big offenders. So I'm going to go and be like, I'm going to go look in my cloud services and see who provisioned this guy, and I'm going to be like, do we need this? Can we shut it down? Can we resize it? It's really expensive. And then finally, it'll tell me by service provider. So here you'll see we're adding costing. So the OpenStack, again, we're adding that reservation-based billing, but this would be a report that I would use, to going back to my question, you go back to your executives and say, look, we're spending, we're spending 48 hours here, we're spending at this price. If I multiply that, I will get, 6 times that compute hour. We're only getting, we're getting like this much money for compute hour. So I know I can make some projections. Like if I do this, if I multiply this, by this number, I know that I can get this many compute hours in 3 months at this price. It's cheaper. How do we do it? And they can help you. Questions?
Can you show in the interface where the various metrics are for OpenStack, and if you want to associate costs with those?
Oh, okay. So yeah, so right now let's go to how I set up the OpenStack Marketplace item. Let's go ahead and filter by OpenStack so I can find it. Helpful. Okay, so here you'll see we have our base products. These are shipped with the product cloudSM, so right away you don't have to create a script or a workflow to provision OpenStack. We know how to provision these items in OpenStack. And I'm going to go ahead and edit this one. And right now you'll see, because there's no structure in OpenStack, so we're providing that structure. So I'm adding a base price of 11 cents. And then for each subsequent item that I'm adding, I could potentially have a price modifier. So you'll see here for the networks that I provision onto, if I add several options for this marketplace item, whichever networks that you are adding into your infrastructure, I could potentially add, maybe it's an extra 15 cents per hour to to be on this network. The same with storage. Does that make sense? And that will go ahead and calculate. So if we go back to being a user, let's go back to being a user and order something. Now let's just pick the top one here. So you'll see here as a user, this is a VMware instance, right? I only know this because I named it, so the user doesn't really have an idea of this. And we're going to go ahead and fill it out. We're going to go ahead and, let's see.
Probably want a dash or something in
I'm going to tie it to my development project. I have the option here to tie it. This was made optional for me by the administrator. So some of these you can lock, and they won't be able to change them. They have to have this automation. That's definitely an option. Here we're giving them the option to select the different automation profiles, and you'll notice we're really interchanging a lot of these different scripts. It's because cloudSM is doing the provisioning and the heavy lifting. The provisioning part and the bootstrapping part is the specific scripting in Chef, Salt, and Puppet. The rest of it is OS agnostic. So if you can get your scripts to cut out the bootstrap, all of them carry over, and you don't need to clean them 3 times over. This is why this is so important. So if you have users who are using Azure and Amazon with Chef and Puppet, you can, kind of incentivize them to come use OpenStack by allowing them to cut out the bootstrap and reuse the same scripts in both environments, and then you can use that reporting to incentivize them to further come back in.
Do you support Ansible?
Not this time. Yes, no, I was waiting for that at the Ansible meetup, waiting for someone to ask that. But that's a very good question. And then also you can attach the parking calendar, also optional. And then you see here, this is not optional. All of our demos are set up to terminate instances after the demo. This is how we at Ostrato keep our bill low. Let's go ahead and add it. Oh, it's a tag, I'm sorry. Let's go ahead and save it to cart. Okay, so once I have in the cart, what you can also do is you can also project, and this is really good for the OpenStack environments. With Amazon, some of these things are very temporary, but when we provision them in VMware and OpenStack, they're permanent a lot of times. So what we want to do is potentially get a cost on how much is going to cost, not by an hourly basis. You kind of want to get an idea of what it costs you over the year. So you have the capability to forecast that as well. And then I'll just click sort of go to provision. And then once that's provisioned, the user gets their status from the cloud services page, and they have the capability to manage all of the bulk actions they have permissions to throughout the course of their work. Questions?
Can you, if you are a user who could instantiate machines, can you restrict it to a specific provider?
Yes.
And also in Amazon, since you have the enterprise and the GovCloud, can you narrow it down to only the GovCloud or only the enterprise?
Yes, yes. So that also came up. So all of the marketplace items can be configured by the administrator. So none of the templates that you see there for Amazon are specific to either, but you can simply delete the extra regions.
Become the admin again and show them when you the permissions for the groups would be probably helpful.
Sure.
So when you set up access controls, you set up roles you can do in the groups.
Yeah. So here's all the permissions. I'm going to use the least permissioned person so you can see the difference.
You might want to use the laser pointer.
Oh yeah, thank you. Oh, okay. So this is not a very permissioned user. So you can see here, I only have a few permissions, which is to manage just the ability to create and manage items. So I can assign my own parking calendars, and I can assign networks and provision and manage those cloud services, but that's pretty much it. So I can't create a budget, I can't do those things, and all of the things in the marketplace, and I can't create new things in the marketplace. All of the things that are in the marketplace have been given access to my role. So, for example, if you have, I'm trying to think of a provider that you don't see in here. Terramark, maybe. Yeah.
Well, like Google.
Right, right. So you don't see them here, right? And so it's because I don't have any items that are allowed to be provisioned into Google.
So can you provision Google Cloud instances?
Not yet.
And this,
It's-
yeah, this is an older version.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming.
We started our integration first with AWS. And so we have what we call the top 5. And so it's AWS and Azure. Google's on the roadmap as the 3rd public one, is the big one, because they're driving AWS crazy. And that's of interest to us, right? And then internally in the enterprise, it's VMware and OpenStack are the 2. Right? So what we're trying to do is we have a list of top 10 functions or services that we want to do consistently across those 5 in the same way. So we're being careful not to drive too deep in AWS, because we want to do, whatever we do, we want to do the same across all 5, right? And then once we do OpenStack, honestly, we get kind of rack space for free, right? We just have to use their API, but similar type thing, right? Does that help?
Yeah. So
Yeah, the same with any other things that are API compatible. So that was why I asked, about the APIs you would potentially expose, because if they are exposed in common formats, they just work, which is great.
Yeah, we focused on the top 10 because, like in Amazon, 62% of your bill comes from the instances, right? The rest of it comes from storage and networks and then other, right? And so it doesn't, we could have a gazillion things, but from a price standpoint, 10 pretty well covers it.
if I want to HP Helium here, it's possible.
And we are compatible with Eucalyptus. That's one you don't see here, actually.
Right.
So, yes. Okay, so any questions on billing, provisioning, management?
Can you migrate an instance from one platform to the other?
Oh, good question.
The answer is we can stop it and we can start it, but moving the data to burst is a problem that no one has yet solved, because that's huge network, potentially huge network bandwidth, right? We're finding some of our managed service providers are beginning to use like the NetApp Direct Connect solution, where they put a FlexPod in their Direct Connect partner. You replicate your data there, and then you can burst into any cloud provider. We would be able to manage that and allow you to then basically start and stop all cloud formations in any one of the providers without you having to move storage, right?
Yeah,
So that's an interesting thing, right?
And we have very strong partnerships. So, how we respond to customers is really based on their, what they need to do and what our partners wish to expose. And so we have very strong partners that are working with us to build the functionality behind the scenes for customers to consume. And then we have customers who, are driving how we respond, what we build in terms of functionality. And so if we go back to, how do I get back to where I was turn off this one? Oh, yeah, okay, thank you. I should do it all on Google. I really should. Yeah, I should. So what we do is we take surveys every year, and we also listen very closely to customers' requirements. And so when we look at what people are using today for cloud, it's actually an even split between VMware on-premises and Amazon, which is actually good news, I think, for OpenStack, because going back to my experiences, let's think about all those clouds that I worked on. So what happened religiously in all of them? So number one, when you did not have chargeback, showback, the resources were eaten in a matter of weeks and sometimes days. When I worked on these projects, the requirements changed religiously every 6 months. So we do have people using these technologies. The journey to OpenStack is a journey. And so what we want to do is we want to make it as painless as possible for existing users. And these guys are your users right here. So if they're using VMware and Amazon, those are your users. You have to attract them. And so OpenStack is great, but what we want to do is we want to make sure we provide that pathway for them. So if you look at the survey, we asked them what they were using, but also what they wished to use in the next 12 months. The biggest ones you see here, the biggest one was Google Compute, but the next biggest is OpenStack. And that's huge, and everyone knows if you add capability for OpenStack, it opens the door to lots of other providers that are all cost competing against each other.
Now you see how we got our top 5.
Right, right. So as more come up, we're definitely looking to listen to our customers and work with our partners to add more and more functionality.
Since you're doing this survey, what's the average amount of cloud service providers that people are using?
The average amount?
Yeah, is it 1, 2, 3?
It's 1 to 2. So our most commonly used one is Amazon. So either people are either 1, so they're either Amazon, Azure, or VMware, or they're 2. And usually the combination is Amazon and VMware, or Azure and VMware. If that makes sense. So usually, and a lot of people are coming to us, usually it's because they have 2.
Two-thirds of the customers, more than 2/3 of the customers have 2 cloud platforms.
Yeah.
You don't see like people who have like 4 or 5, something like that?
Yeah, you see more.
Well, let's clarify who it is, right? So individual companies, I think, no, but MSPs that wish to resell or service, managed service providers or integrators, that's where you see the numbers go up. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then again, we want to give them a path. So we will continually to add functionality all the time to. It potentially won't be as cool as cloud versioning. No one's really solved that, but we want to take the inches wherever they are, and we want to go ahead and translate some of these proprietary formats into more general formats that can then be used to allow companies to compete on price. So everyone's clamoring. So Dale, what's the number one reason everyone's going to Google and OpenStack?
Cost.
Cost. Right? So if you're using these proprietary structures, can you get out of the expensive providers? It can. And it's really amazing. We go talk to these managers, these DevOps teams, and talk about how agile they are. And the first thing I ask them is, when are you going to start using another cloud provider? And they are shocked. They're just like, we're so what, we can't do it. And I'm like, I thought you were agile. And it's because they're adopting this. So we encourage you guys to use the generic structures.
So the VMs that you're provisioning out, are they all being provisioned to a single tenant, or can you support multi-tenancy OpenStack clouds and differentiate based upon the user who logs in?
Yes. So yes. Yeah. So you can add as many tenants as you like. And you didn't see it in the demo, but in the demo we have a group tree structure. So when you map those groups, the tree structure is used to identify which tenant the group is provisioning under. Right? And any questions? Okay. So I'll go ahead and take more questions, but that was most of what I want to talk about. So I'll just put my contact information up there for you.
What do you say?
Excellent. So what is Ostrato? What is that? The meat? What's the origin of that word?
Origin? That's a hard question. I can't answer it. I don't know.
Ostrato?
Yeah.
Well, clearly the strato is stratosphere, right? And so O is for open. So the system is actually built. It's a very, very lightweight system. The client is all JavaScript and style sheets and things like that. The back-end server is strictly REST API calls, written in Python. We have a Python-based orchestration engine that does all of the integration in either cloud providers or the enterprise services. And then we run a database. And there's no direct call between the API and the back-end. They communicate through the database, basically, on event triggers that show up in the database, right? And so it's extremely lightweight that way, right? But it's all open source stuff.
What's your web framework?
The web framework right now is Oh boy, we're using,
Apache and Angular JS?
well, it's Apache 2, but Apache 2 is what we're using now. We're actually using some legacy type of JavaScript libraries, which we're now converting over to Angular JS to make that a little bit better. And on the back end,
We're using Node in the back.
what's that?
Node.js.
Oh, no, so I think,
No.
so the other ones are potentially jQuery, is that what you mean?
jQuery.
Yeah,
We're using
jQuery.
jQuery and Angular are what we use on the front end. On the back end now, I'm not sure if we're going to go to Django or not. We're using some I can't remember the library names now. Forgive me, it's late. I got to find this one. But
Have some more.
yeah, I know I need some more beer. But it's extremely lightweight. Like I said, it takes about 3 to 5 minutes to install the thing. Pretty simple.
Yeah, yeah, I agree when you say legacy, so just like, when we say legacy, we mean like 3 or 4
Last
years.
week.
Right, 3 or 4, like maybe like 3 or 4 years old. So the orchestration engine is Python, and the database is MySQL. So yeah, not
We're looking.
too
We actually have 4 Carnegie Mellon students, grad students, who are going to be doing their capstone project and working for us. And they're all database guys. And one of the things I'm going to have them do is actually examine the database, because one of the things we are looking at doing,
One of the things we actually are looking at doing is deploying collect the lightweight agents, because we are beholden to the APIs of the cloud service providers, and Amazon's the most secure. Azure sucks and Google's worse.
Well,
And so we have to, and so what we're trying to do is we looked at different agents. We're going to probably deploy collect D, which it's extremely lightweight, and you determine what runs by plugins that are kernel loadable modules, and it consumes less than 1% of the resources, and we'll have it push data to us. But when we're pulling billing data and they're pushing all those metrics to us, because we want to use that in forecasting, we actually want to look at that data and say, hey, you're running in AWS, you're running an M3 large, and you could probably be running a T2 micro based on your CPU utilization, right? Or you're running, your volumes are this big and your file system's only a small percentage of that. You could probably shrink it down, that kind of stuff, right? But we want to carry it forward and do forecasting and say, even though you're optimized here on AWS, you could probably run that whole thing cheaper on Google, right? If you want to consider it. We're not there yet, but part of what we're going to have the Carnegie Mellon students do is look at our backend database to see if it'll scale. And do we do something like go to a NoSQL database, or do we stick with a relational type database for what we're doing, given that what we want to do with reporting is more along the lines of traditional OLAP, right? So those are the questions we have to answer yet as we grow. Okay.
Just remember to
What's the minimum spec that you need to run this on?
We recommend to start with is an M3 large, just to give you room, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or but if you're running it internally, it's however big you want to.
Not on a new micro, right?
Do you support SAML authentication?
Yes.
Also, I think a big question is, does it work with Open vStorage?
Well,
I heard it's great
so
product.
that's you see now where I was going with that. So Open vStorage is a fabulous product, because as we all know, it's much cheaper than Amazon S3. And so what we want to do is we want to combine cloudSM with your on-premise installations of Open vStorage, and we want to get at this reporting data. So we will talk.
Can we deploy Open vStorage in Amazon?
We have a version of we've done.
Oh, wait, we need to hear the answer, sorry.
There is actually a demo of me on YouTube where I have where I'm spinning up a virtual machine which is running by means of the technology on top of Amazon S3. We can do that. Now it's not recommended because you have a lot of latency between your local presence and Amazon S3. So you can do it. Is it advised? No, we will not support it. It's really for local environments. I think we believe that that's the best use case.
Let's impress the spreadsheet nerds. Some real numbers.
Yes.
So we have beer left over, grab one and take it home. But don't drink it while driving. Jennifer, thank you very much.
So this